Hey Resurrection students, it's Leah. And you know what? This past summer, I was privileged to go to Disney World with my family. Here we are, my parents, my husband and kids, my brother, sister-in-law, and their 2 kids who happen to be just a little younger than mine. Oh, it was so amazing. And my nephew, George, he's only 6. He had a great time, but there were some rides that he was too short for or too young to do. And he repeatedly asked, "Am I too young for this one?" with that sad look on his face. Oh, it broke my heart. And in the case of rides at amusement parks and a few other things in life, there are definitely things that we might be too young for. But being called by God is not one of them. Have you ever asked if you were too young to be in a small group or to help lead worship at church? Or have you ever thought, I'm too young to serve as a greeter or to offer my insights on what I think about God? It's easy to say, I'm too young to do this or that, and to feel like you couldn't possibly take on that kind of responsibility. Maybe you feel too young to really understand, too young to make a difference or to be useful, or too young to serve God. It can seem daunting and impossible. Or maybe you just feel like you aren't ready to take it all on yet. If you've ever felt this way, don't worry, you're not alone. Jeremiah, who might be my favorite prophet from the Bible, he struggled with thinking the same thing. Like all the prophets, his road was hard. He was called to stand up to kings, princes, priests, false prophets, and people, knowing that none of them might ever turn back to God. He watched as his nation, Judah, ignored his repeated warnings from God and lived to see them taken into the Babylonian captivity. And even though he faced heartache for 40-some years, Jeremiah remained true to God and kept telling others about their need for God. And we can learn so much from him and find the courage to do the same. God spoke to Jeremiah at a young age, telling Jeremiah he knew him before he was even formed in his mother's womb. The Lord said, "Jeremiah, I am your creator, and before you were born, I chose you to speak for me to the nations." And Jeremiah replied, "I'm not a good speaker, Lord, and I'm too young." "Don't say you're too young," the Lord answered. "If I tell you to go and speak to someone, then go. And when I tell you what to say, don't leave out a word. I promise to be with you and keep you safe, so don't be afraid." God called Jeremiah to speak for God into the world, but Jeremiah didn't want to do it. Now, don't be so shocked. At times, we've all felt the same way. Jeremiah's excuse, it was a simple one. "I do not know how to speak, for I am only a youth." And there's something really honest about this, isn't there? I mean, he felt too young for the job. And his lack of experience, it kept him from gaining the skills to speak well. He probably thought, oh, come on, there's gotta be someone else who would be better at doing this. There's no way anyone would listen to me. I can't be responsible for this. But God was having none of it. "Do not say I'm only a youth." God doubled down on Jeremiah's call. God's mission for his life was real. Now, I'm no prophet like Jeremiah, neither are you, but we are still called to be a part of God's plan for our lives. God has purposes here on earth, no matter your age. And God calls us to join in sharing the hope and sharing your faith. God has put you in this time, at this place, with your past for a purpose and a reason. You see, our excuses do not move God. Jeremiah's youth and lack of skill, that seemed like an obstacle to the young prophet, but not to God. God blew right past that concern. Because God is bigger than Jeremiah's concern, and God is bigger than yours. God can use your life. and help you overcome feeling too young to make a difference. History has shown that God works through young people to accomplish His purpose. The Bible contains examples of men and women who were used by God from an early age. For example, God used David when he was a young man. David, still a young adult, faithfully watched over his father's flock of sheep, killed a lion and a bear, killed Goliath, and served as a commander in Saul's army. God used Josiah, who rose to the throne of Judah when he was 8 years old, to institute several reforms and lead the nation to a spiritual revival. In the New Testament, God used Timothy, a young evangelist, to preach the Word of God and be a positive example. And all these examples remind us that we can worship, we can learn, and we can preach about God regardless of our age. When we use "I'm too young" as an excuse, it's because all we can see is ourselves and what we've been able to do in the past. But God sees who we are now and knows what we are capable of in the future. And the earlier we trust what God can do through us, the more we have to practice sharing our faith in the world. Maybe that looks like serving at church as a volunteer. Or maybe it looks like starting your own Bible study or small group. Perhaps it looks like inviting friends to youth group. Maybe it looks like joining or starting a club at your school that is inclusive for everyone and a way that you can spread love throughout your community. However it looks like for you, know that like Jeremiah, God is calling you out of your comfort zone and into God's purpose for your life. And unlike my nephew at Disney, God's calling is a ride you're never too young for. See you next time, students.